Sup Shredders, my name is Logan, aka Spiderhands, and welcome to an SP Reacts, where today we've got ourselves a couple of tracks from an act named Big Sexy, the first of these titled Roads of Dust. And if we switch over to here, I should note that this is a collaboration between Gary McCagnon as well as Alex Goroshko, if I'm not mistaken. Apologies if I mispronounced those names. Gary and Alex from Big Sexy, and the record label is Outside Records. We're going to be listening through two tracks today from them. I previously reviewed other ones as well, such as She's Leaving Early, She's Working Late, as well as Here We Are, so it'd be good to check out more. We're going to listen through these tracks from start till finish, and we're going to hear what we think. I should note that I'm going to be scoring these tracks out of 10 based on various musical criteria and each of their own sort of like mini conclusions, but for now, let's go, Roads of Dust.
Sun burns my eyes. Last night's lies just won't die. Dusty roads never clear. Shadow fears drawing near. Whiskey breath, cold as steel. Lost my love, hard to heal. Cracked boots drag through the grime. Lost all faith one more time. Lonely hearts don't belong in this place where we've gone wrong. Broken dreams swept away. Nothing left.
There's so much to absorb.
But today.
Various harmonics.
Empty house, peeling paint. Echo prayers of a saint. Photographs fade to gray. All the words I couldn't say. Lonely hearts don't belong in this place where we've gone wrong. Broken dreams swept away. Nothing left but today. Drifting slow through the haze. Haunted nights, hollow days. But somewhere deep in the pain, I still hear her call my name. Morning breeze, soft and wide. Dust lifts off from my pride. Many times rearrange what's been lost, interchange. Lonely hearts don't belong in this place where we've gone wrong. Broken dreams swept away. Nothing left but today. Lonely hearts don't belong in this place where we've gone wrong. Broken dreams swept away. Nothing left but today.
Okay, I do like quite a lot of this. Yeah, predominantly really happy with it. You know, really good music. So in each of these post-track sections, I'm going to be providing an overall song analysis of everything from lyrics and vocals all the way through to studio production, as well as any applicable constructive critique, and then finally my general thoughts from a listener's perspective, and then there'll be an overall analysis of these two tracks at the end to go through things. But before I go any further, I should note I gave this track an overall score of 8.1 out of 10, which is a very high score for me. I rarely give over an 8, but there's just a lot of stuff that's done extremely well here, and I want to sort of talk about it more in a moment. So yeah, before we go any further, what do we think this track is about? Listening through it intently, I feel like this track, with all the references to only having today, all the references to the people in the past and everything like that, and kind of the sense of decay throughout the piece as we travel on, just having to sort of cope with what is. It kind of, I think, it goes for two different angles. The first is that the only permanent thing, again, we have is today. Like, all these things we have ruminating or reflecting or oscillating in our head, these past moments are things we can't necessarily do anything with, no matter how they affect us in the present. It's kind of coming to terms, I think, also with accepting the fact that if we have opportunities in the future, like, we might do them differently because of what we learned in the past there. This has been like themes that have been discussed through Big Sexy's work over the time I've reviewed them, and I feel like they're continuing to sort of work through this stuff. And I do think that that is a positive thing in the sense that they're finding continued sort of like mileage within it, whilst still growing and becoming sort of like more musically mature over time. The vocal performance from Gary here is fantastic, really comfortable with his pipes and his vocal technique and his head and chest voice. No issues with some of the diatonic and chromatic phrasings melodically there. We have some neat call and responses there. We decorate well, but we also allow enough room for the music to breathe within the piece as well. And so naturally, I just think across the board, it's very solid. There's a sense of earnestness whilst trying to sort of commiserate with the bluesy leanings of the instrumental parts in the background. Structurally, the track is really well fleshed out there. Mixture of different verses, choruses, like little interlude sections, solo sections, etc. We phrase ourselves quite neatly with our various lead voicings, including those lead guitar parts there. Some sort of nice sort of diatonic and bluesy sort of pentatonic phrasings there. Mixture of different sort of slides and hammer-ons and sort of bends and stuff, working through the chromatics when required in order to add that kind of smoothness to it. We have some neat sort of like crispy bar chords in other parts as well for a bit of added funkiness to it. And we're comfortable with the alternate picked kind of palm muted elements there. And we decorate the guitar in different ways with different tones and different intensities through the piece in a way that ultimately lifts it up. But we're also comfortable, such as around the 20-second mark, simply having the bass and the drums there and allowing the bass to have that thick full tone walking through its pattern and line as it does, you know, not necessarily just relying on the root notes in order to carry presence or importance for it. The drums are quite well handled and adept as well. I appreciate the mixture of different sort of cymbal kick and sort of snare pans with some rolls there that are quite nice. A bit of dynamic range to that as well, not the same loudness all the time. We use alternate percussion as well, such as tambourines there and some hand drums. And even though I wasn't necessarily a massive fan of the tapping that we had in that interlude section as like a call and response, I just felt like the track had already been quite busy up until that point. We could have potentially have just allowed a little bit more space there. Ultimately, it was still good. And like 2 minutes 55 there with that build there was kind of neat because it kind of resembles sort of a kind of a crescendo-ish kind of thing going there with the lowness, you know, the low stature of the toms rising up into the rest of the cymbals and everything in that outro section. And we have like an organ solo as well. We have multiple instrumental sections as well, with the organ solo being quite articulate there, the keys there, reflecting a similar sort of emotive sort of like style to the guitar parts, but clearly within its own element with its tones, textures, and timbres. And it plays well whether it's by itself or behind the good vocals as a sub-layer. I just dig the fact that our on-beat and syncopated rhythms with the drum kit and the hi-hat in particular, very sort of like well adjusted there. We're comfortable adding bits of flurry and stuff when need be. And even though I wasn't necessarily a fan of all the decisions made with the hand drums, it is nice to have them as accents or sort of like air candy-ish components in and out of the piece. Like, it adds a sense of dimensionality with how quiet it is on the bongos and stuff like that. I dig that. Even like the little things like that, kind of like the trill that we have on the 1 minute mark with the keys there, that bit of tension and drama there is cool. And we don't just have these kind of staccato like short notes there, we have other held notes there throughout different instruments as well there to elicit different moods and a sense of sort of expansion within it. And the crispiness with those big bends and stuff you have on his guitars occasionally just kind of is the icing on the cake. It's a very full sounding track. I've probably missed different instruments just because there were so many different things going on within it. It's a very lush composition instrumentally, but it's played well from a performance perspective. Different rhythms are adhered to. Interesting chord progressions, variations there with how we represent those. You know, like structurally, there are different ideas per bit. The transfers are clean, and sort of thematically, we go for a kind of a very sort of like slight 12-bar leaning with some of those patterns, but we're not sort of like going into the full shuffle or anything like that. We have a mixture of quarters, eighths, and sixteenths to help facilitate a sense of smoothness to it, almost like we're not trying to be too jumpy about it. Yeah, so I think the amalgam of blues and funk here is effective. We have some extended bar chords there that add a bit of kind of funkiness with some dominance there, whilst adding some major and minor kind of sevenths there to sort of smooth out the sadness there and make it almost a bit more Soleil, bittersweet, and melancholy. And I just think as a closing note, outside of those different progressions and the bass line being quite supportive whilst also exploring its fretboards, you just have some neat sort of natural harmonics that add a sense of glow and shimmer to it that is quite pleasant. It's like the rising sun, as per the art there that I've got on the screen right here. Hopefully you can see that. I try to remember to do that at the start, but sometimes I forget. Studio recording, mixing, and mastering across the board is tight. I'm happy with the presence of the vocals, the various sort of takes there, the guitars, bass, drums, keys, hand drums, tambourines, etc. They're well placed within the stereo field, left to right sides of cans, as well as the frequency spectrum. There's no weird resonant frequencies. The leveling in general with the dynamic range being like fantastic, it's quite loud, so, you know, that's very good. Nice and loud, bit of side chaining, bus compression, limiting is handled. Ultimately, it's commercial grade at this stage, no complaints about that at all. And it's just, yeah, it's great to hear more of their music. And so we have In the Shadow of Good, track number 2. Interesting bends there. There's the shuffle. Nice little bit of pep to the staccato there.
Did you play my betrayal until you got it just right? Did you play out war games for 40 days and 40 nights? It's how the number one target on top of the chart and shot the bullet that travels through my heart. Your little sweet face never gave it away. Never once suspected you until that awful day. I worked hard to give you everything I could. Evil lurks in the shadow of good.
It's busy with the crashes, but I don't mind how bombastic it is.
Did you meet your lover at the grocery store? Did you tell him about our kids and our house on the shore? Will he honor your name and treat you like a queen? Or is he just another player who only wants to play? Your little sweet face never gave you away. Never once suspected you until that awful day. I worked hard to give you everything I could, but even looks in the shadow of good.
Great. I like the brass in this.
You had the nerve to concede the attack. Spare me the tears and all the begging back. When your nightmares wake you in the middle of the night, you reach for your lover, but it's nowhere in sight. You remember the face that calmed you as you cried. You guarded all your dreams as you lied. Your little sweet face never gave you away. Never once suspected you until that awful day. I worked hard to give you everything I could. Even looks in the shadow of good.
Yeah, no, honestly, the production's really tight. Like, this is some of the best production that I've heard in tracks that have been sent in a while. Really good stuff. They've clearly got things polished at this stage. And so for In the Shadow of Good, track number 2 for today, I gave it an 8.2 out of 10. I feel like it's just another really solid effort from Big Sexy at this stage. They've just got a really fruitful collaboration going on there that I think has enabled them to make some amazing music. This in particular, this track, I think, is talking about In the Shadow of Good. It's more so about a woman or that they were with and they had kids together in a house on the shore and everything like that. And then they're kind of asking if this person that they found in a supermarket or grocery store is like actually someone going to treat them right or if it's a fling. And this has been a theme that Gary has discussed in various tracks there. So it's something I think that we're still working through if it wasn't another person. And I think that that's really important. Like at the very least, even if it's not directly relevant or like relatable, it's like authentic to Gary's lived experience there. And you can feel the pain when they discuss it, but also just how kind of effed off they are about it at the same time, that they're frustrated by it, which makes complete sense. So, you go through that journey with them and you have another really solid vocal performance there. We have some interesting legato runs there, vibrato, etc. We're comfortable in our voice and our range there, and we dance around, and it's very effective and energetic. They clearly want to be there on the microphone. There's a solid level of polish that's shown there. So ultimately, it's just very satisfying to listen to, even though you feel for them. So ultimately, yeah, now that's 2 for 2 in terms of what's been done on the mic there, and they sell the story well. Structurally, the track at 4 minutes, just outside the 40-minute sweet spot, it is sold incredibly well as well. You have a mixture of different sort of like guitar, bass, drum, brass components there. You have organs as well there. It's a bit more sort of like I don't know if it's necessarily upbeat, but like the energy with the shuffle makes you feel like it's moving a bit more quickly than the previous one there. Like we've got a direction now we're headed there, kind of moving through life. And it's fantastic just from the brass alone, because I want to start with that. I thought the way that the brass section was represented was fantastic. They've got this great clarity to the tone of them within the mix. It's very sort of well decorated within the frequency spectrum there in the stereo field. The chords that they play there, the way they're so tight with each other is tremendous. And then it's just such a wonderful outro there with the way things come to a close with that big finish there. It just you can imagine them playing it live and how dope it would be. But then, of course, you have the guitar with its various sort of solo sections playing a similar sort of style of guitar to the previous track, navigating the swing pattern of the drum kit really well. But then we also have power chords in certain elements, as well as some sort of like bluesy chromatic riffs there and single note like lead melody, like rhythmic melodies on the guitars, rhythm parts as well. And we kind of, it's very sort of like flexible and malleable, and we decorate the track neatly with a variety of these different sort of crispy guitar layers with our rhythms or lead there. Because again, you've got verses and choruses structurally, as well as those different lead sections and brass outros and stuff. And you kind of like come down with the sort of organ around that 3-minute mark there. And you've got this key as well. You've got the piano as well as the organs, and there's just so much stimulation going on there. And we like reinvent what's going on there with those chord progressions we've had prior there in a way that sounds sort of invigorating because of the attention to detail. But I just dig how the brass and guitar in certain parts, such as the 45-second mark or so, in tune with each other. There's a great sort of rhythmic unison there. But just like the way the track also starts so gently as well, with a mixture of the vibrato, tremolo on the keys. The guitar starts it, but like the organ comes in afterwards. And then you have the drum kit coming in with the ride pattern there, the kicks and snares kind of bumping away there, and you feel like you're ready to throw down. But there's like a kind of sense of kind of quiet malice to the way that the vocals kind of come down to match the intensity of the instrumental parts there. Like in the verse, for example, things come up when the instruments come up and Gary comes up to meet them. But just I dig the unison notes on the vocals and how they go behind as a sub-layer, what Gary's doing on the main parts vocally, and like the way that the guitar sort of ascends there, because I'm not sure which parts Alex is doing within this, but they're doing a tremendous job too if they're playing literally any of the instrumental parts, if not more than one. But yeah, honestly, like, no notes. Like, this is just a very sort of compelling piece of music that, there's just so much going on that I need multiple listens to listen through that, but I feel like that's a compliment. Just the various sort of tom fills that we have, the triplet pattern on the drums make total sense there. The bass line underneath sort of driving forward and providing a great sort of accompaniment to those to those drum patterns. And so when you combine the different key parts, the way the keys arpeggiate with the organ kind of like simmering in the ether there, the guitar, bass, drums, and then brass, as I mentioned, all those sort of fun elements going on there, kind of stabbing away or staccatoing or crescendoing, you know, like you've just got a mix that's so full of life. And then you have a tight performance, but then also thematically, you have, again, more sort of bluesy rock, but it's done in a way where it's not trying to be the genre. It's like more Big Sexy, basing it on their experience and kind of getting instruments to move their way to sort of compel them towards their sort of version of it. And I just like the fact that even though we do play in a way which is sort of like going to be agreeable to fans of this kind of music, we also simultaneously, again, we aren't afraid of having extended solo sections or different parts or stops or kind of breaks or anything like that. I just dig the structural complexity to it, as well as the use of the bluesy and pentatonic phrasings for a more accessible feel to it, but whilst also not being afraid to sort of like have different chord progressions whilst also reinterpret the existing ones. Ultimately, studio recording, mixing, and mastering production is commercial grade as well. No complaints whatsoever in terms of the way we've approached the recording of the vocals, guitar, bass, drums, various sort of piano, organ sections. I think having the keys a bit sort of clean, if I'm not misinterpreting what they were, having them as a clean texture and amongst the organ was just nice to have a slightly more sort of like percussive layer, if that makes sense. But then the brass also decorating the upper register, the frequency spectrum was just as much a compositional decision as a post-production one. And so ultimately you have all the boxes ticked, nice and loud, bit of pumping, bus compression, limits handled with dynamic range. Very good, 2 for 2, and we're going to talk about it more in the conclusion. Because welcome to the conclusion of my review of these 2 tracks from an act named Big Sexy. We've got ourselves the tracks titled Roads of Dust and In the Shadow of Good. In this section, we're going to provide an overall analysis of these 2 tracks, as well as any applicable constructive critique, and then finally my general thoughts from a listener's perspective. And I should also note that the overall song score for these tracks is rounded up to 8.2 out of 10, which is very strong. Like, it's very rare that I give scores above 8. Ultimately, this is just indicative of the fact that I feel like a lot of this has just been done tremendously well, and I'm very happy to have been able to hear their work today. But before we go any further, what do we think these tracks are about? I would assume that the combination of these, because I've already spoken about them individually in our own sort of like mini conclusions at the end of each listening section, it's a track where it's a situation where we've got someone working through the separation they had from this person, but also looking at the decisions that person made and going, you know, was that person really worth it? And then also, especially with the Roads of Dust, kind of looking at the fact that even if there were mistakes made and things outside their control and everything like that, and even if it just, you know, patently sucks, the only thing we have is today. So therefore, regardless of how we're heard, regardless of what we've gone through, we have to just continue moving forward, even as we forget things to try and make new things, I suppose. I'm not sure. I know there's more nuance to that one, but I need another listen through. In terms of vocals, I feel like Gary does a fantastic job on the microphone. They're very comfortable in the hidden-juice voice, solid vocal technique, comfortable with their like unison notes and harmonies and melodies, etc. They decorate the mix well, express themselves neatly, go down when they need to, and then come up when in other parts there they match the loudness in the music and know how to represent themselves. Both the actual sort of like expression as well as the performances on the mic are good. We hit the notes cleanly. There's a mixture of vibrato and tremolo, legato parts there. We know to be a bit more sort of pepper we need to, and we move neatly between sort of straight 4/4 and swing 4/4, like the shuffle and track 2. So ultimately the vocals are well handled and very authentic performance. Structurally, these tracks, you know, like they've got verses and choruses there, as well as different solo sections and little breaks and interludes and kind of like big outros, such as In the Shadow Good with the brass there, as well as intros. So there's a lot going on there structurally, but the transfers are typically seamless. There's never a stumbling or a bit of confusion there. We've really sort of got things handled in terms of like creating compelling listening experiences that don't really give the listener a reason to sort of look away. There is a lot of different instrumental parts within each of these 2 tracks there. If I can just, you know, the main ones are going to be drums, guitar, bass, and keys, especially the organ there. But we also had pianos playing certain arpeggios and sort of melodies within interlude parts there. We had hand drums doing little kind of tippy-tap kind of staccato and sort of like glissando parts there as well, which is kind of neat. We had tambourines being a nice sort of alt for like a hi-hat. I'm sure there are other parts I missed, but in terms of talking about the main big four there, the organs, the guitars, drums, and bass there, I think the organs were well represented in this primarily because of how sort of supportive they were of the scales and keys instantiated, as well as simply being sort of nice and fragrant and floral in the mid to upper register there. The vibrato and the kind of wobble that they had to them danced neatly alongside the guitar and some of the vocal melodies into the rhythmic unison, but they also knew when to sort of stay still and also when not to be there. They were kind of peppy and a nice sort of additional energetic layer to the mix. The guitars had there was a plethora of different sort of like lead patterns, sub leads and main leads and solo sections, and some, the songs had multiple solo sections. There was a key solo, to be fair, in the first track, if I'm not mistaken, near the end, that was like a sub layer behind the vocals as well in some points, but just I like the mixture of different sort of like legato and bendy techniques and slides, and the way we sort of not only played within the diatonics but also the pentatonic minors as well as the bluesy scales and stuff. We weren't afraid to sort of get into some sort of like kind of spicy notes, but we did them in a way which made sense for the genre, and ultimately we knew when to go back to some sort of funkier layers, play some dominant sevenths, some sort of like extended sort of bar chords there. We also knew when to sort of think things relatively chill with power chords when you had to indicate the triads as well as some sort of like single string pick patterns with alternates that were nice. So ultimately the guitar was well decorated within the piece, and the bass was also nice and supportive and reflective of that. In the first track, Roads of Dust, the bass did dance around a little bit. I've said dance around a lot. Just kind of like it moved around its fretboard a bit between notes and loops, and I just think that was kind of cool because sometimes you just had the bass guitar being very sort of minimalist and sort of root note oriented, even if there's different rhythms, whereas in here we allowed it to kind of be a bit more sort of active there, and it was just kind of seemed like I wanted to be there as much as everything else. The drums were fantastic with a mixture of different quarters, 8ths and 16ths there, as well as some triplet patterns, for example the tom fills in the shadow of good there, with the shuffles and straight 4/4s handled eloquently. We're very comfortable with keeping a steady tempo there. We had some interesting articulation such as the rolls there, and it was like left in a stay where ultimately you just kind of, both these tracks flew by. There were moments where the drums weren't there and moments where the drums were, and they knew when to sort of like allow space for other things and when to sort of take hold. But it was all about the kind of feel of it, and we pocketed for the most part, and I feel like that was a sensible decision there. But ultimately very sort of articulate on the drums there, so generally the performance was tight across the board. Thematically, these tracks were mostly sort of blues or kind of funk leaning there, with minor sort of like tinges there, which makes sense considering the subject matter for both. Neither of these tracks were positive at best, At best, the first track was melancholic or bittersweet. And I think that when you have these chord progressions and kind of bass a little bit off of 12 bar, or like kind of like work in some sort of like extendeds for a bit of sort of emotional nuance there, that's just sensible because it's trying not be not too on the nose. But just I think a lot of the carrying came from the individual solo sections as well as how the vocals coalesced with that. So effectively you have two tracks there which are clearly in the minor key and have like sort of like dedicated chord progressions and bass patterns which are easy to follow along with, but it's never a dull moment. And so ultimately, just with the studio recording, mixing, mastering, the production side of things, I think it's commercial grade. The vocals, guitar, bass, drums, tambourines, hand drums, different keys, etc. well represented throughout the stereo field as well. The frequency spectrum across the board is very consistent there. No complaints at all. It's just, no, there was dynamic range, nice and loud, but a pumping bass compression limiting is handled, and like we can just clearly sing. So there wasn't overproduction of vocals in post. So yeah, honestly, like really, really happy with these two tracks that I've heard today. No applicable constructive critique. I mean, like subjectively, I explained the tippy taps and like the interlude section of the first track, Roads of Dust, is just maybe being a little bit busy with those additional kind of but like that was simply because we had so much going on before that it might have been nice to just have a tiny bit more space. But it's cool. It's cool. Again, we wanted to keep the people engaged, so that's fine. From a final general listener's perspective, I feel like at this stage they're good. Sometimes I listen to musicians, and as I review them, I can hear there are developments and movements in the right direction. And I feel like they've just got something really cool and special here. I feel like if they can focus on their live elements and kind of work towards a place where they can get out and do some gigging and stuff like that, they do well for themselves. Or even sort of work towards an EP or an album at the stage, despite the fact that, again, it's a singles economy. Ultimately, though, I wish them all the best of luck in future, both Gary and Alex. And thank you very much for watching my review of these tracks from Big Sexy, titled Roads of Dust and in the Shadow of Good. Hopefully you enjoyed them. If you did, please go show them some love via their various social medias, as well as their Spotify page, and stay cool and stay safe, and please remember to support your local musicians and artists at this point in time, as you need the help more than ever with all the crazy stuff going on in the world, and I will catch you in the next SP Reacts. Spiderhands out.